Assalamualaikum and a very good day everyone. So, in today's video, we are going to take a look at one of the literacy skills in learning, which is writing, specifically in assessing it. So, these are the content that we are going to discover. The first one is, what is assessment in general? Why do test takers being assessed? And second one, we have types of assessment. We just go through the list, okay, for this one. And next to our main topic for today, assessing in writing. And we are going to take a look what is power, P-O-W-E-R in this part. And the last one is how to assess it. But before we proceed, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, like and share. And inshallah, more benefit content are coming soon. Okay, before we continue, I would like to share with you a quote that relevant with our topic for today. She said, "You can always edit a bad page, but you can't edit a blank page." Those are the words of a famous writer, Jodi Picoult, when she was giving a talk about the habits of an effective writer. These words got me thinking about most how we try to edit a blank page, and I'm also a victim of this sometimes. Because sometimes I wake up with a sentence in my head or even as I'm going about my day, a phrase can come into my head and I know I need to write something on that. Before I used to just brush it off and be like, it will come back, and guess what? It does hardly. And when I crack my head and I try to remember what it was, for the life in me, I just can't seem to, and it's so frustrating. So I have since learned to write down the sentences and come up with a paragraph that will eventually turn into paragraphs, and voila, I have a story. So don't be afraid to start. Make mistakes is normal. We are human beings. So from the mistakes that we made, we learn from it. So the key is to start. Next, we proceed with what is assessment. So assessment is refer to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate and measure. So educators use a diverse array of assessment tools and methods to measure everything. So why do test takers being assessed? Because we know assessment is very important for tracking progress, planning the next steps, reporting and involving parents, children and young people in learning. So the purpose of assessment is to gather the relevant information about student performance or progress, or to determine students' interest to make judgments about their learning process. So after receiving this information, the teacher can reflect on each student's level of achievement, as well as on the specific inclinations of the group to customize their teaching plans. Okay? So next, we have types of assessment. So different types of assessment will help you to understand students' progress in various ways and adapt your teaching strategies accordingly. So here we have an objective assessment, norm reference, criterion reference, summative, diagnostic, and formative assessment. And most of people, they use the blue box one, summative, norm reference, and formative assessment. So here we have the some sort of the key questions that we have to have as an educator, because we know assessment for learning should always be ongoing and actionable. So when you are creating assessment, these are the key questions you have to have in your mind. Like, did my teaching strategies reach students effectively? Did students find this lesson too easy? Or is it too difficult? Or what did I most want students to learn from this lesson? Or did I succeed? Okay. So next we are going to proceed with assessing writing. So student writing can be evaluated on 5 product factors. There are fluency, content, conventions, syntax, and vocabulary. because we know that writing samples also should be assessed across a variety of purposes for writing to give a complete picture of a student's writing performance across different text structures and genres. Okay, so next, proceed with what to assess. Okay, so curriculum based assessment must start with an inspection of the curriculum. Many writing curricula are based on a conceptual model that takes into account the first one is process, we have product, and also purpose. So this conceptual model therefore forms the framework for the simple assessment techniques that follows. Okay, so we go with the purpose. We go with the process. The steps students go through and strategies they use as they work on writing, like how much planning does the students do before he or she writes? Does she have a strategy for organizing ideas? What seems to be the obstacles to getting thoughts down on the paper? How does the students attempt to spell words she does not know? So, in order to make an instructionally relevant observations, the observer must work from a conceptual model of what the writing process should be. So, from Englert, Raphael Anderson, Anthony, and Stevens provided a model of a 5 steps of writing process using the acronym of POWER, power, that I mentioned. So the first one you have plan, organize, write, edit, and revise. So each step has its own sub-steps and strategies that become more sophisticated as the students become more mature as writers. So accommodating their style to specific text structures and purposes of writing. Next, we have the product. So an effective writing process should lead to a successful product. A writing product fulfills its communicative intent if it's an appropriate length, is logical and coherent, and has a readable format. So when various conceptual models of writing are compared side by side, so 5 product variables seems to emerge. For example, like we have fluency, content, conventions, syntax, and vocabulary. So, a balanced assessment should look at all 5 aspects of a student's writing. The first one is we have fluency. So, the first writing skill a teacher might assess with a beginning writer is fluency, because they are being able to translate one's thoughts into a written words. So as a concept of print and fine motor skills develop, the students should become more proficient at writing down words and sentences into compositions of gradually increasing length. So the developmental road of very young writers involve trying to understand what written language is about as they look at books, become aware of environmental print, and put pencil to paper. So next we have a content. So content is the second factor to consider in the writing product. Content features include the compositions of organization, cohesion, accuracy, and originality in creative writing. So the third one is a convention. In order to fulfill the communicative function of writing, the product must be readable. So writers are expected to follow the standard conventions of written English. For example, like correct spelling, punctuation, capitalization, grammar, and legible handwriting. Okay, so teachers are traditionally have been more strongly influenced by length of paper, spelling, word usage, and appearance than by appropriateness of content or organization. So next we have a syntax. So writers often often produces sentences that follows a repeated subject-verb or subject-verb-object pattern. So the beginning of the composition reveals this typical repetitious pattern to a certain degree in its first few sentences. So a more mature writer will vary the sentences pattern and combine short subject, verb and subject, verb, object sentences into a longer, more complex sentences. And the last one, we have a vocabulary. So the words used in a student's composition can be evaluated according to the uniqueness of maturity of the words used in the composition. Okay, so we have the second one is the purpose. So different purposes for writing call for a different text of structures. Okay, so instruction often begins with the story structures because they represent the genre most familiar to children. Okay, so writing a story calls for a narrative text structure that includes a character, setting, problem. So writing about one's beliefs calls for a persuasive text structure that includes discussion of the problems, statement of belief, 2 or 3 reasons for the belief, facts, and examples that support the reasons. So the last one for this lesson is how to assess. Okay, so there are several ways to assess writing. The most common method is to use some sort of rubric. Other forms of writing assessment use checklists or a rating scales. As a teacher, it is not the only one who can assess a writing sample. So students can assess their own writing by working in pairs or small groups. So small groups of students can meet and conference about one piece, or each student can bring a piece to exchange and have reviewed about the writing. So as with any good assessment, the purpose should drive the procedure. Okay, so the first one, we have create your own rubrics. So there are several sites that enable you to create your own rubrics for assessing writing samples. For example, like project-based learning has a create a printable checklist, features that it is easy to use. So within a particular category, they can choose items within conventions to include on the rubric. So next we have student self-assessment of writing. So many teachers ask students to read over what they have written before it is considered finished. So it is often helpful to provide students with a basic checklist to use as they review their work. And having students assess their own writing process is also important for 2 reasons. The first one is for a self-assessment allows students an opportunity to observe and reflect on their own approach, drawing attention to important steps that may be overlooked. And the second one is self-assessment following a conceptual thinking. So, and the last one is peer editing. So students can work together in pairs or small groups during the editing and revising stages of the writing process. So this peer editing can help students learn about parts of their writing that was unclear, discover which parts an audience found exciting, and get some suggestions for the other things to add. So teach students how to peer edit using 3 steps. The first one is compliments, suggestions, and corrections. Alright, so in conclusion, ongoing assessment of writing is integral to effective teaching of writing. So a teacher cannot make an appropriate instructional match between a student's skills and appropriate tasks without assessment. So before I stop for today's lesson, so I leave you guys with a very beautiful quote. Start writing no matter what. The water does not flow until the faucet is turned on. So I think that is all from me. And that's me. Okay, thank you everyone. Assalamualaikum and have a nice day.